Christopher Nolan is one of the greatest directors of the 21st century. He's a British-American filmmaker obsessed with time, space, and physics, best known in pop culture for his holy Batman trinity, working with the cast of 10 Things I Hate About You, and is the letter N of my Director Digest A to Z series where I compare a director's first, recent, and most popular films to find their unique style. I've also added Memento to the lineup. In each of these films, there is always the same 5 motifs: the subject of time, interrogation, a god complex, a damsel in distress, and bear with me here, a mind game. Nolan almost always tells his story in a non-chronological structure, and regardless if told literally or figuratively, you could deduce each of his films into a game, like Sudoku or chess, but more on that later. Anyway, Christopher Nolan has one of the most consistent directorial styles, and it is now his time for the Academy to award him for that. Of course, we're going to get into Oppenheimer later, so with that, let's dive in. Following is Christopher Nolan's directorial debut made in 1998. It's about Bill, part aspiring writer, part bored loner, who does what he calls shadowing, where he follows people in the hopes of using their lives in his novels. His next subject, Cobb, makes him out and takes him down a path of burglary, a path Bill becomes obsessed with, changing his appearance, befriending the girl whose home he burgled, and even carrying out hits of his own that eventually get him into trouble. It's a great first film, shot in black and white, with ambitious shots, great production design, prop choices, and even choice of locations. It's a very character-driven film that's very imposter syndrome meets the chameleon effect. Of course, in good Nolan fashion, even by his first film, he's had a clear directorial style with his notorious 5 motifs. There's the subject of time. In this case, it's not only told non-chronologically. There's a looming anxiety of getting caught, to which Bill eventually does, but by his own device. Back to the non-chronological structure, the film jumps between 3 different timelines, the first, second, and third act, all presented to us within the first 5 minutes of the film. We just don't know it yet. There's interrogation between Bill and the officer, a god complex from Cobb, whose justification for burglary is how it can change the course of someone's life. There's a supposed damsel in distress, the blonde who wants her pictures back from her ex-boyfriend, and a mind game, in this case Sudoku. Set on medium mode, the 9x9 grid is scarcely placed with the first numbers like the first clues following gives us. The box, the change in hair, the bruises, the girl, and why was he talking to an investigator? And then throughout the movie, we slowly start filling in the missing gaps to complete the puzzle. Oppenheimer is everything that is so unique and fascinating about Nolan's storytelling skills, birthed into one of my favorite films of all time about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb. His character was poetically juxtaposed with Louis Strauss, an envious and insecure man out to get Oppenheimer. Strauss and Oppenheimer's dynamic reminded me so much of Mozart's and Salieri's dynamic from the 1984 film Amadeus, where the jealous antagonist succeeds in his one-sided vengeance, but doesn't really succeed in anything else. Even in his latest film, the motives from 25 years ago are all still present. There's time as a subject, overall and structurally fusion versus fission, an objective point of view focused on Strauss, versus fission, the subjective point of view from Oppenheimer focused on Oppenheimer, and also literally time-wise, the looming countdown of the Trinity test. There's interrogations, 2 interrogations this time, Oppenheimer versus Roger Robb, and while they don't claim it to be one, Strauss versus the Senate. There's the God complex, again, both Oppenheimer and arguably Louis Strauss. They both thought that their personal opinions were unquestionably correct, Strauss being sure that Oppenheimer pinned all the physicists against him, and that he had this vast amount of power to reign in the shadows. And for Oppenheimer, 1, he tested a bomb that he knew had the slightest chance of destroying the world, hello, and 2, verbatim lines in the film, like Niels Bohr, who says, "You're the man who gave them the power to destroy themselves," and Strauss, who assumedly says, "It made him the most powerful man to ever live." There's a damsel in distress, Jean Tatlock, and for Oppenheimer's mind game, it's a crossword puzzle. Throughout the film, we approach pre-existing concepts of chemistry and theory that can all be tied together using one another. The crossword is also used within its characters, as it takes a combination of various physicists to complete the puzzle, aka the making of the atomic bomb. And now to Christopher Nolan's most popular, Tenet. Tenet is the notorious pandemic release about a secret agent who's given the word Tenet as a weapon and sent to prevent the onset of World War III. Using what the future has created called inversion, he travels backwards in time in order to succeed in his mission. There's Neil, the best friend, Priya, the supplier of the villain, Andre, the actual villain, and Kat, the villain's wife, who he develops feelings for. Tenet was also one of his only films that had some sort of color scheme. Primaries like red, yellow, and blue popped up in quite a few frames, along with the color orange when it came to some scenes involving the topic of inversions. Nolan doesn't really utilize obvious color choices in his storytelling skills, so it was really abnormal to watch a scene with these LED colored lights for seemingly no reason. Besides this being my least favorite Nolan film, his 5 motifs are at their all-time peak here. There is a subject of time, as he calls it inverted time, where people from the future are moving backwards in time. Like, literally backwards and not just time traveling. There's interrogation, very brief, but when Andre finds him spying on the boat and questions him. There's a god complex, Andre again, who somehow has come to a point in both present and inverted time that if he dies, the world dies with him. Then there's the most obvious case of a damsel in distress, Kat, who just wants her son, and the brain game, Jenga, with a third of its blocks missing. One team is removing blocks, and one team is putting in blocks until one or the other makes it fall apart. As we can see, over the span of 25 years, Nolan has stayed extremely consistent with his artistic visions, just like in Memento, his second film and first critically acclaimed. The subject of time was the loss of it and the cyclical nature of it. Just like Oppenheimer and the Greek myth of Prometheus, Memento was of the Greek myth Sisyphus. Instead of just spending each day rolling the boulder back up the hill, the main character would begin to remember why he was even rolling it in the first place. There's interrogation, or something very similar to it, the way Leonard talked on the phone.
The truth about my condition, officer.
A god complex, which may be a stretch, but Leonard, who suffers from amnesia, and makes the conscious decision to play into his condition by lying to himself to make him happy, and consciously involving and hurting whoever falls victim to it. As he says,
You think I just want another puzzle to solve? I have to believe that my actions still have meaning.
There's the supposed damsel in distress, Natalie needing revenge, and the mind game, a jigsaw puzzle, with one condition. You get an hour to put together 1,000 jigsaw pieces, and if you don't, you have to restart each time over from scratch, like Sisyphus and like Leonard with short-term memory waking up every day. Nolan's motifs are used throughout his 25 years of film, but at the core of it all, it's really just his obsession with time. There's the subject of it, the race against it, and even the manipulation of it. I think we could all agree that it is time, for Christopher Nolan to win the award. His ambition from his first film Following to his complex and original story structures introduced in Memento, then again in Inception and Tenet, all the way to his emotional writing capabilities like in Interstellar and Dunkirk, it is all accumulated into his work on Oppenheimer, which I think is fair to say objectively one of the best films of the past decade.